Hi guys, welcome or welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, my name is Amy. I am a mum of 2 boys and really happy to love books. So if you want to see some more bookish content, then please consider subscribing. It would be amazing to have you here. So you may be wondering, Amy, you look a bit dishevelled and you look a bit uncomfortable. It's because I am dishevelled and I am extremely uncomfortable. It is 25 degrees here in the UK. I think last week we maybe got to about 12 to 14 degrees. And yesterday a heat wave started and we went out with a couple of our closest friends and I got incredibly sunburned. It's all on my back, but it serves me right for not wearing SPF. So it's my own fault, but I am feeling a little bit uncomfortable and a little bit dishevelled and a little bit hot. So if I seem like my mood is a bit dampened, it's because I do not cope well with heat. But the eldest one is at preschool, the youngest one is asleep. So I'm going to film the mid-year Freakout book tag. I have never really done one of these videos before. I've never really done like a book tag or new YouTube tag video before. So this is going to be my first time doing this, so I'm super excited. So let's jump right into this book tag. So, best book you have read so far this year. I don't have a physical copy of this yet. I will definitely be getting one because this was absolutely phenomenal. I think it was one of my first 5-star reads of the year. But this was it was probably like 6-7 stars, and it is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V. Schwab. This book broke me to my core. It invoked so many feelings. I cried, I laughed, I was so happy, I was so sad, I was so frustrated reading this book, and I just wish the ending was different, but I feel like the ending was perfect for this book. So we follow Adeline. She then goes by Addie further along in the story, and she runs away from her wedding in 17th century France, I believe. She leaves her entire family behind. She leaves behind her place in society, her soon-to-be husband, like her betrothed, and she just leaves all of that behind because she doesn't want to be confined to just being married to someone and having children. She doesn't want her life to be just that. So she runs away and she ends up meeting and making a deal with some kind of demon, death, some kind of personification of that, and makes a deal with him that she will live eternally until she basically has enough, and once she has had enough, he will then take her to be his. But she keeps going, and she lives she goes right up until modern day, when the main premise of the book is set. But one catch of this deal that she has made is everyone she meets ends up forgetting her. So she will meet one person, they will have encounters, mini relationships, one-night stands, and then the person will not recognise her. They'll have that, oh, I've seen you somewhere before, but I can't pinpoint where, but they will not fully recognise her until one day she wanders into a bookshop and she steals a book. She steals a copy of the Odyssey from this bookshop. The owner catches her, and then she goes back the next day and he still remembers her, and from then on they form this kind of friendship that then turns into something more. And then we find out that Henry, the owner of the bookshop, actually has a little problem of his own from a deal that he made, and exploring that, seeing their relationship develop, was just so magical, but it was so upsetting at the same time. I'm not going to give any spoilers, but your heart will break if you read this book. That is the best book that I have read of the year so far. Best sequel I've read. Now, I actually haven't read many sequels because I've barely read any series this year. I tell a lie, I've read a lot of firsts in series, but I haven't read a lot of sequels. But I have finished one whole series, and the best sequel I've read so far is That Time I Got Drunk and Saved a Human by Kimberly Lemming. This is the 3rd book in the Mead Mishap series. So the first book is That Time I Got Drunk and Saved a Demon, and the second one is That Time I Got Drunk and Yeeted a Love Potion at a Werewolf. I love the name of that book. It's fantastic. But this is the third and final book in the trilogy, and it's all set around this little town called Boohale, and all three protagonists of the books are either friends with each other or related, so they all have connections with each other, and the male protagonists as well, the male main characters, all are connected with each other as well. So I'm not going to give a synopsis of this because it will give away other parts from the first two books, but if you want to read this series, I would highly recommend it. The first and this book I rated 5 stars. The second book I rated 4.5, just because there were some elements in there that I didn't like as much as in the first and the third. I would highly recommend this series. A new release you haven't read but want to. I actually have 2 here because I have heard so much hype around these, and I just need to get them in my reading brain because I've heard so many good things about them. The third book comes out in January, and I feel like I need to read them before the third book comes out, and that is Fourth Wing and Iron Flame by Rebecca Yarros. We have dragons, we have a dragon riding school. I want to read these so bad, and I've heard so many good things about them. More so Fourth Wing than Iron Flame. I've heard mixed reviews about Iron Flame, but I still want to read it nonetheless. So these are 2 books that I really want to read this year. I know that this one, Iron Flame, is the new release compared to Fourth Wing, but in my mind they're both new releases because I know they were released quite close in proximity to each other. So these are the new releases that I want to read this year. Most anticipated release for the second half of the year, that would be Wisteria by Adeline Grace. I have Belladonna, I have Foxglove. I haven't read any of them yet because I want to wait for Wisteria to come out because then I will have the full trilogy. I actually have it on pre-order, the Waterstones edition, so that will be coming to my door in August, I believe by the end of August, start of September. That will be here, and then I will probably read all 3 of them one after the other. So that is my most anticipated release for the second half of the year. I'm so excited. Biggest disappointment. This wasn't difficult to pick my biggest disappointment. I've only had 2 books that I have rated 2 stars. I haven't had any 1 star. This one was close. This one was very close to being a 1 star. The only reason I gave it 2 stars was because there were certain elements and themes in the book that I did enjoy, like themes of divination and tarot. Other than that, I thought this book was awful, unfortunately, and it is The Cloysters by Katie Hayes. So we follow Anne, and she is granted this job at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. She goes there because she has been offered a job, but when she gets there, they say, oh, your boss has actually had to leave unexpectedly, so we don't have a job for you anymore. But then, I believe his name's Stephen. I actually can't remember the name because I read it that long ago. He is the manager and curator of the Cloysters, which is like this gothic building that seems to have lots of there's lots of conspiracy theories regarding like tarot and divination and these specific tarot cards that have something to do with these cloisters. And she then teams up with, oh, it's Patrick, I think it's Patrick actually, sorry. Again, this book was just a shambles, so I'm really struggling to remember people's names. But she teams up with Rachel, who is this curator's assistant, and they end up developing some kind of weird best friend buddy relationship. But then she also meets the gardener of the Cloysters, who is he looks after all of the poisonous and deadly plants in the Cloister garden, and they end up forming some kind of relationship. This book was just so confusing, and by the end of it I did regret reading it. I thought I could have spent so much more time reading a book I actually wanted to enjoy, because this book was so hyped up. I saw it in so many bookshelves, like so many bookstore front windows, and it was so hyped up, and when I read it I was so disappointed. But I've read it and it was very disappointing, so let's leave that there. Biggest surprise, now this was actually an arc I got through NetGalley and eArc, and it is Love of My Afterlife by Kirsty Greenwood. This is a contemporary romance. I am not a romance girly. I am more into dark romance, I do have to admit. This is a very light-hearted romance, and I did not think I would enjoy it, but I loved it. So we follow Delphi, and at the start of the book she actually dies. She chokes on a piece of food and she passes away, and she ends up in heaven. Or I say heaven, the afterlife, and she is greeted by a therapist that she will then team up with, and she says, I'm working on this app to help people in the afterlife find and date people. And to Delphi, who is a very introverted woman, she is like, oh heck no, that sounds like literal hell. And then another guy comes in called Jonah, and they click instantly. They fall head over heels for one another, and the therapist sees this connection, because Jonah actually ends up getting sent back to the land of the living because there was a glitch in the system. So her therapist turns to her and said, I am going to give you 10 days. You need to find Jonah by yourself. By the way, his memory has been wiped, so he has no idea who you are. And you need to get him to kiss you of his own volition. So you cannot force his free will in getting him to kiss you. And you have 10 days to do it. So she doesn't hire him, but she asks for help from her roommate or neighbour, Cooper, and he is also very grumpy. It's grumpy meets grumpy. It's not a grumpy sunshine trope, it is grumpy meets grumpy. And he ends up helping her, but there is a catch in him helping her. She has to pretend to be his girlfriend because he does not want to be set up with a girl who lives down the road from his parents' house. He does not like her, so he asks Delphi to be his fake girlfriend. And the fake dating trope, we usually know what happens with the fake dating trope. And Delphi ends up finding love and friendship in all the places she didn't expect. And this book was so light-hearted and fun. It's definitely a summer recommendation because it is set in a heat wave in the middle of London. I loved it so much. I probably won't get a physical copy just because even though I did love it, it's just not something that I think I will read again, but that doesn't make me love it any less. So that was the biggest surprise for me because I am not into contemporary romance whatsoever, but I really enjoyed this. New favourite author, for me it has to be Jennifer Lynn Barnes. I've only read one book so far, which is The Inheritance Games. I have the two other books in the series up there, which I will be reading very soon. Her writing style, the fact that she makes the chapters in her book so short, it makes me eat it up. I read this in, I think, under 48 hours. I loved it so much because the writing style keeps you on your toes, it keeps you interested, it keeps you perplexed enough to want to keep going. And the fact that the chapters are so short, you're like, hang on, there needs to be more to this, then you keep going. And then you have another chapter and another chapter and another chapter, and I just love that so much. I much prefer shorter chapters than I do to longer chapters with more information packed in. I do like chapters being short and sweet, and she's perfect at it, so I'm really excited to read some more of her books. So the next question is newest fictional crush. Now I actually have two. One of them is again from the Inheritance Games, and that is Jameson Hawthorne, who's one of the Hawthorne grandsons. It's very, he's very witty and has lots of comebacks, and he's got that air of mystery about him as well, which I really enjoyed. There's just something very lovable and likeable about him, but yet you hate him at the same time because he's very arrogant. But I did end up loving him by the end of this book. And then the second one is Jay Friday, and he is from the Luminaries. So he is the neighbourhood bad boy, but he is actually a big softie, and the main character of the Luminaries, Wednesday, is shunned by the Luminary clan because of something that her father did, so it wasn't even her fault, and everyone shunned her, and Jay basically had to follow suit, to follow what everyone else was doing. But it turns out that he has a massive soft spot for Wednesday still, and he will help her at the drop of a hat. and that is very admirable about him. So Jay Friday and Jameson Hawthorne are two crushes that I now have. Newest favourite character, that has to be Cinnamon from That Time I Got Drunk and Saved a Demon, or any of the protagonists in Kimberly Lemming's books. I just love them so much. The fact that they are women of colour, women who are not stick thin, they have body, they have voluptuousness to them. The fact that Kimberly Lemming has included characters like that, I love that so much. And even though I am not a woman of colour, I am a bit on the bigger side, and the fact that that is included in these books and authors are being more inclusive to having non-stereotypical characters in their stories makes me so happy. And Cinnamon is just so sweet, and she's so funny and witty and charming, and I just love her so much. I would love to definitely go out and get drunk with her. She just seems like such a fun person, and I just wish I had a friend like that in my life. It would be so fun. Next one is A Book That Made You Cry, and I actually finished this yesterday. This will be in my June wrap up. It's not a book, it is a graphic novel, and it is The Craw by James O'Barr. Now, The Craw is one of my favourite movies, if not my favourite movie of all time, with Brandon Lee. This is actually technically a reread. I read this about 3 or 4 years ago, but I did forget a lot about the details in the graphic novel compared to the movie. So I am kind of counting it as a new read because there are so many things that I forgot, and I actually didn't read the author's note at the beginning of the graphic novel, and I read it yesterday because I finished this in one sitting, and I bawled my eyes out finding out that this was actually based on the author's personal experiences. He lost his, I don't know if it was fiance, if it was his fiance, but it was definitely his girlfriend. She was killed in a car accident, and this story is all about forgiveness. Not forgiving the people who have wronged you, but forgiving yourself in the fact that you couldn't change anything. You couldn't save the person that you miss so much. And I was bawling my eyes out by the end of this. It's just such an emotional read, seeing all the emotion, all the anger, all the, revenge, that just desire for revenge going through Eric, the main character's brain, and just his sheer rage. It does tug on your heartstrings because he had everything taken away from him, and his chance at redemption is just filled with rage and hurt, and he doesn't feel any kind of peace at all until the very end of the novel, in a scene that wasn't added until much later, actually, in this edition. And when I read that scene again, I just started crying because it was his chance at peace and redemption and forgiveness. And this is just, it's gory, it's dark, but if you want a story that will tug on your heartstrings, read this. On a happier note, A Book That Made You Happy, Can't Spell Treason Without Tea by Rebecca Thorne. This is like Legends and Lattes, but with tea and a bookshop, and I just adored this so much. It doesn't quite meet up to Legends and Lattes because that is one of my favourite books of all time, but this was just coziness in a book. It was like sitting by a fire with a hot cup of tea with your fluffy socks on in a cold winter's forest. I loved it so much. So we follow Rhaena, who is the guard of the queen, and Kianth, who is like this archmage. She is one of the highest ranking mages in the realm. They have been hiding their relationship for 2 years, but their commitments have always kept them away from each other and for pursuing their dream of opening a tea shop and a bookshop in just a brand new place, starting afresh. That is until one day Queen Tulane, who Rhaena works for, conducts this massacre, and Rhaena has decided that she has had enough. So she turns to Kianth and says, "I'm done, we're going." So they get on their horse and their griffin and they go and start afresh in a new town and open up this tea shop. Coziness in a book. It made me so happy, and just warm and fuzzy inside. So I will definitely be reading this again during the autumn and winter times. So the next question actually isn't applicable. It's your favourite book to movie adaptation this year. I haven't read any books that have been made into TV series or movies this year, so that isn't applicable. Most beautiful book you've bought this year. I have to include two in this because they're part of the same series, and I've mentioned these so many times, but Belladonna and Foxglove, these are just stunning books, and I love these UK hardcovers. They're just absolutely gorgeous, and the fact that there are tie-ins from one cover to the other, and that carries through to the third book, Wisteria, as well. So we've got the birds here, and then the bird in the fox's mouth, and then the Wisteria cover has the fox with a rabbit on the cover, and I love the fact that it continues on the back on Foxglove. It doesn't on Belladonna, but another thing that I love about these is the fact that, I don't know if you can see, but the naked hardbacks are actually the same colour as the dust jackets, which I really, really love. These are some of the most beautiful books I've ever seen, and I can't wait to have Wisteria in my hands as well. Books you need to read by the end of the year. Again, Belladonna and Foxglove are definitely on that list because I need to read this series, see what all the hype is about, and then hopefully finish the series not long after when Wisteria comes to my front door. Next is actually a reread as well as a sequel. I'm going to reread Godkiller and then read Sunbringer by Hannah Kana. I loved Godkiller so much, and I think Sunbringer will be just as good, if not better. And I know that a third book will be coming probably next year, I want to say in 2025, but we'll see. I can't wait to delve back into this world again and join Kissen and Elagast and Inara on their journey. I'm just so excited. And then lastly, this has been on my TBR for a while, but I want to reread Daughter of the Pirate King, Daughter of the Siren Queen. I have read both of these already, and then the last book in the trilogy, which is Vengeance of the Pirate Queen by Trisha Levenseller. Those are definitely on my summer TBR because for some reason I always think of pirates and summer being linked, because being on the high seas, looking for treasure, being on a boat. Every time I've seen movies like that, or I think about it in my head, it is always sunny and warm. So I always think of summer when I look at books like this. So they are definitely on my summer TBR. So that was the mid-year Freakout book tag. I now have to put all of these books back on my shelves. But I really hope that you guys have enjoyed. Please let me know the answers that you have to these questions in the comments below. I'm so curious to see what books you enjoyed, what books you didn't enjoy, and what books you want to read in the future. Please let me know down in the comments. But I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. Please subscribe if you haven't already if you want to see more bookish content from me, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!